Are you someone who's always worried about not finishing books? Or are you someone who feels guilty or you have that feeling of, oh my god, I've committed the biggest crime when you're not completing a book? Then today's video is going to be super useful for you. Let's get started. Hey friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. As I said in my intro, today we are going to be speaking about why I don't feel guilty about not finishing books, right? Because, growing up or even when we were in school and, we've always been told to take things to finish line, and we've always been told, hey, if you're not completing a book, you're not doing justice to it. Or internally, we have always felt, okay, you know what, I need to complete this book cover to cover. But of late, there was a big change in the mindset because I've read a couple of books over the years, and I've come to this point in my life where I don't feel guilty about, not completing books. And I'm going to be telling you 4 reasons of why I don't feel guilty. So here they go. So reason number 1, most non-fiction books could be much shorter, right? So again, a big disclaimer, I predominantly read a lot of non-fiction books. So if you're someone who's into fiction, maybe this video might not add a lot of context or might not help you, but predominantly from a non-fiction perspective, right, most books revolve around just 1 or 2 core ideas, and 1 or 2 core ideas would comprise probably 20-30% of this whole book, right? The rest 60-70% is going to be around evidences, it's going to be around examples and stats that back up this core idea. So if you feel when picking up a book, if you feel like, okay, you've got the core idea of this book by just skimming through chapters, or let's say by reading the first few chapters, then I would say you can happily quit and then move on, right? So if you feel like you've got the core idea of a book, I would say you can quit and move on to the next book rather than beating yourself up over, oh my god, okay, I didn't finish this chapter number 24 or 23 or whatever. Most non-fiction books could be a good length shorter, probably at least by 30-40%. Again, that's my personal assessment. The reason number 2 is skim for the win, right? So in most cases, when I buy a book on Kindle, what I try to do is, obviously I would have bought the book either when a friend has recommended me, or I've found this, useful through some other YouTube recommendations, or let's say through Goodreads. What I do is I just try and skim through, right? So, there might be people who would have said that, okay, they found this chapter to be pretty useful, or they would have told that, okay, I found this idea to be pretty useful. I try and jump to the main idea, or, I try to skim the main idea by going to that specific chapter. And if I feel like, okay, I've got the core idea by just skimming through the chapter, I would probably quit the book. Or if I feel like, okay, I need some other context by reading the previous chapters, or I feel like, okay, here reading the further chapters is going to kind of add to the core idea, then I would continue reading the book. If not, I usually skim the non-fiction books for that one core idea, and if I get that idea, I usually try and quit the book. So if you're someone who's into non-fiction book, and especially if you're picking up a book based on recommendation, I would say read 1 or 2 core chapters before you feel like, oh my god, okay, I need to complete this book. And especially with the likes of Kindle and the free sample that you get from Kindle, this is going to be much easier. Third one, this is the biggest mind shift that I've had, is the cost of worrying about sunk cost. So I've stopped worrying about sunk cost, and hence I've stopped feeling guilty. So what do I mean by that? More often than not, as humans, we keep thinking about, okay, you know what, I shouldn't be quitting this book because I've invested, let's say, a couple of bucks in this, or if you're someone from the subcontinent, I've invested 300-400 rupees, or you've invested like $5 to $10 in this book, and hence I have this moral responsibility to complete this book. But you know what I've realized over time, going on to read a wrong book, or going on to read a book that you're forcing yourself to complete, you are wasting time. And by wasting that time, by forcing yourself, what you're doing is, you're losing the motivation to read your next book. So what I've realized is the biggest thing that you can waste in reading a book that you're not interested in is time, and not the sunk cost. So I've come to realize that, okay, time is a much bigger resource, and if I'm wasting my time on a book that I'm not interested in, or in a book that I've got the core idea, I should just probably not worry about the sunk cost, right? Because for me, the bigger habit to kind of inculcate is reading more books, taking lessons from them and implementing them in real life, than completing a book cover to cover. And then the fourth and the final reason, why I don't feel guilty about quitting books is because I reread a lot of the books. For example, I've read Make Time, the book by Jake Knapp. I've read The Atomic Habits a couple of times, The Richest Man in Babylon. So these are books that I keep going back and rereading because just for the amount of lessons or amount of things that I discover when I reread these books, right? Because as someone who's into reading, and as someone who's trying to pick up reading, we are always thinking that, okay, what, I need to discover the next big book, or I need to find the next classic, or I need to find the next book that will kind of change my life. Hey, but here is the thing, right? Rereading books that have helped you in the past, every time you read them, you're gonna get a new idea, or you are gonna get something, an insight that you didn't discover the first time. So I try and reread classics or books that I felt, okay, I've got the core idea, but I feel like, okay, I'll pin them to come back and read again. I try and reread those books, and I've always never regretted rereading books. So those are my 4 reasons. Just to quickly iterate, most books could be shorter. So if you feel like you've got the core idea of the book, move on and don't feel guilty about quitting the books. Skim for the win. Always skim the book for the core idea, from resources from where you discover the books, either from Goodreads or YouTube recommendations. Skim to the core idea, and if you feel like, okay, you've got the core idea of why that book has been done, I would say just move on. Stop worrying about sunk costs, because time is the biggest investments you can give, and it's the responsibility of the book to keep your attention, and it's not your responsibility to kind of keep reading a book where it doesn't hold your attention. And the fourth and the final reason why I don't feel guilty is because I reread classics to draw new insights, draw new perspectives. So just always remember, when you pick up a book, no one gives you an award for completing a book cover to cover, right? So it's absolutely okay to quit books. It's absolutely okay to stop reading books once you've got the core idea. So this is Praveen Ramesh signing off.